how short-term marketing will destroy your practice and how it will make you a miserable owner of a dental practice. In this episode, we're going to talk about why so many dentists get trapped in this short-term marketing cage and how you can overcome that, and how the most successful practices and the happiest owners are building sustainable practices through a long-term vision. Hey everybody, I'm your host, Shane Simmons, and I am the CEO of Crimson Media, where we help dental practices grow through proven online marketing. And today we are going to talk about something that I see often. Okay, so we work with a lot of startup practices. So that's really kind of our, niche in the dental space. And so in working with startups, it's beautiful because people come to the drawing board, if you will, with a vision, right? They have a vision of what they want their practice to be, how they want it to run, the type of experience they want for the patients, but really more importantly, what it's going to mean for their life. And that's what we love about startups. And that's the reason I started Crimson Media years ago, like a decade ago, was to be able to provide a certain level of service that I thought was missing from the marketplace, but also something that would be fulfilling for me. And what I have found is there is this trap that new business owners, specifically startups, but also seasoned business owners, fall into. And I think part of it is the world that we live in. So I'm actually reading a book right now called Digital Minimalism, which I highly recommend you check it out. And it's kind of funny as a marketing person who works so heavily in search marketing and social media that I'm reading a book about digital minimalism. But what I have found in kind of reading this is that we compare ourselves way too much to what we see on social media. Social media is essentially life's highlight reels. So if you're constantly watching highlight reels of practice owners talking about, how many patients they saw and how they're dominating and life's perfect, this, that, and the other, you're going to want to start to chase that as well. And that's where this trap comes in, and that's called the short-term marketing. So I'm going to lay out 5 things that I've seen in how short-term marketing destroys practices, what that means, what it looks like, and how you can overcome that and not fall into that trap. Okay, so the first thing is with a startup specifically, but this can be any dental practice when you start marketing, I partially blame the marketing companies because what I have seen, and not every marketing company is like this. There's some really good ones out there that, we're friends with because we have similar mindsets, but a lot of them, I would say the vast majority of them, always just to make the sale, are trying to promise this vision, right? It's like a sales tactic where you find someone's pain points and then you try to help them overcome those pain points, build their vision in their head, and then help them, say, okay, we have the solution to that vision. The problem is most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it takes time to get to where you want to be, right? Get rich quick. There's a reason that doesn't work. There's a reason your patients that want to come in and, they want a complete smile makeover and they want to look completely different overnight isn't possible. There's steps that need to be taken. So that's where we kind of start here. And really number one, and the first principle in this trap is this false promise of instant ROI. So ROI, return on investment. People go into it and say, I need an ROI in my marketing in 30 days. I need my marketing ROI in 60 days. I need my marketing ROI in 90 days. And that's a red flag for someone who's wanting to build long-term success in their practice. And here's why. If you start chasing fast ROIs, usually what that means, unless you're in just like a super rural area that's not competitive whatsoever, but assuming you have other practices and competitors near you, if you're going to search for that really short-term ROI in like a 30-day, 60-day period, you're going to have to really discount your offers, right? Like super cheap cleaning, exams, x-rays. And listen, there's nothing wrong with having an offer. We're all about having an offer, but not super cheap offers. And the reason for that is because that is going to get you playing a numbers game. And if you're wanting to build a high volume practice, that's a business model. There's nothing wrong with that. But what we've typically found with the practices that we work with are people are wanting to build, a practice that's the opposite of the associateship or corporate dentistry that they worked for, where it's more relationship focused and building long-term patients. And so when you try to achieve a 30-day, 60-day, sometimes even a 90-day ROI with your marketing, you're attracting a certain type of patient that's looking for crazy deals and discounts. And yes, you'll keep some of those patients. And yes, some of those patients will be upsold to treatment. But when you start playing that game, you're constantly having to stress and worry about bringing in a super high volume of leads just to get a certain number of patients in the door. And then you're going to have a higher churn rate in the practice too with your patients. And then what we've found is you're also going to have then a higher churn rate with your staff because your staff's going to get burnt out or your team. So think about that when you're building a practice. If you're going for that super quick ROI, that fast ROI, typically you have to do that with some discounts and offers, and there is a price that you pay for that. So that's number one, this false promise or thought that you have to have instant ROI. The second part of this is, and how you kind of overcome it, is you got to think of marketing not as a short-term thing. Short-term is typically sales driven, right? If you need to get patients in the door today, it's usually kind of a sales problem, or it's a lack of preparation in most cases. You got to look at marketing as a long-term investment and looking at it as a flywheel, not a slot machine. This, if you take anything away, think in terms of a flywheel for your marketing, not a slot machine. Slot machine is you're hoping and praying, you're putting money in, and you're hoping to hit big on it. And rarely do people hit big on a slot machine. It happens, but rarely. So it's also less predictable in the long term, which then causes you stress, which then leads to you burning out and worrying. And the whole reason you started a business isn't to be worried sick about whether or not you're going to have enough patients to be able to make payroll and meet your production goals and your bills and all of those things. You built a practice so that way you could build something long-term valuable in the community. So when you go the slot machine method and try to get instant ROI over and over and over, leads to really stressful times versus a flywheel where you look at marketing from a longer view. So think of it as like investing, right? If you're investing your money into an S&P 500 index fund, you're playing that over the long term. You're not going to get rich quick overnight, but after 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, momentum takes off and that flywheel begins to really take momentum with you. So when your marketing is a flywheel, typically what that is putting out quality content and ads. So not based around bargain basement deals. Again, that doesn't mean you can't have a new patient offer, but not being the cheapest, lowest because that attracts a certain patient, but rather sharing with people in the community what makes you different, who you are, your personality, your team's personality, what patients can expect when they come in. How is the patient experience really going to be? And how can you connect with and build that relationship with your community before they've ever stepped through the door? That's why we love doing Facebook ads, Instagram ads, that rather than saying, oh, we've got this, $29 cleaning exam, x-ray, fill out the lead form, you get 200 lead form submissions and maybe 20 book. Rather than doing that, we like to play the long game where we're putting patient testimonials out. We're putting little pieces of content about the dentist, the doctor, fun facts about them, who they are personally, to start building trust with the community long term. So then that way, when those patients come in, they're already sold on the practice, right? They're already sold because they already know, like, and to a certain extent trust you, but that takes time. Think about people like, and trust in your life. Did you know, like, and trust them right away? Probably not. It probably took time. It's like dating. So think of your advertising that way. And when you think of your advertising that way, even though it takes longer to build that trust and that long-term notoriety in the community, once that starts taking off, it compounds quickly. So the second principle there, marketing is a flywheel, not a slot machine. The third thing that I want to kind of dive in here is talking about how the top 1% practices think differently. So again, worked with dozens of dental practices over the years. And what I have found is those practices who, hit the $1 million mark in their first year or second year and then continue to grow and become profitable, not just top line revenue, but actually profitable, and have a really sustainable practice, is not only do they look at their marketing as a long-term investment in that flywheel, but they're also investing in the brand of the practice. And the brand of the practice is going to kind of contradict the next thing that I'm going to talk about, which is like ROI tracking. Brand is hard to track an ROI on. And because it's hard to track an ROI on, dentists typically don't like it, because dentists, many times, and business owners, very black and white, right? If I put this amount in, how much did I get back in return? And that is important, but there's an aspect of the branding that is vital for long-term growth, because you can't measure the ROI of it necessarily, and it's going to take time. But the more that you're putting yourself out there, practice, again, patient testimonials, how, life-changing smile makeover, to the simplest thing as just somebody coming in and how they felt when they walked in, even if it was just for a cleaning or exam. Continually having advertising dollars behind that type of content on social media, for example, having it on your website with custom content, videos, photos that show that patient experience. What you're doing is you're building a long-term seed to plant into the community that then grows over time, stronger and stronger. It's like Apple, for example. I love using the Apple example, but even when Apple has down months or years, because you could argue right now, Apple stock's been down. They really haven't made any significant innovations here recently. And I'm an Apple person. Everything I use is an Apple product because the brand is so strong and I trust that device. But it takes time, right? It took time. So think of in terms of your brand. How can you build that brand long-term? And that's not just from advertising. That's part of it. It's also how you show up each and every day, how your team shows up each and every day, how you interact with patients. Those are things that are going to build that brand. And you want to see marketing as that relationship building, not just lead generation. So 1% practice owners, they play to win in 3-year timeframes, not 3 weeks. So that's the third. The fourth one, which is in a direct, more of direct, I guess, that dentists typically like, is how to track ROI. Because a lot of practices aren't doing this correctly. For years, when we would talk to practice owners, we'd say, okay, let's look at the new patient numbers. Let's see where those patients came from. And of course, we've had certain tracking things in place there, but we can't just rely on patients' word of where they found you. For example, if you have a patient come in and said, hey, I found you online. Great. Where online though? More than likely that patient isn't going to remember, or if they are going to remember, they may not even remember the original source they found you. Perfect example of that is somebody who goes to Google. Many times, people have no idea if they clicked on an ad or a Google ad or an organic search or the Google map. We know, right? We pay attention to these things. Your average person doesn't. They don't realize that. So if they just put Google, how do we know if you're running Google ads? Like, is it from a Google ad? Is it from organic Google? And all that is an ecosystem, right? It plays together. But if you're just going off of the word of the patient, you're not going to be able to get enough data to really scale the best that you could. So that's why here at Crimson Media, not only do we have call tracking in place where we can directly, based off of cookies that get on people's browsers, see where that patient originally came from. If they saw a Facebook ad and then came to Google, looked at the reviews, and then called from Google, we can see all of that. But then now with certain practice management softwares, we can actually integrate into that and see that patient, where they booked, where they came from, and then how much production came from those patients. And the reason that is so important, again, when we're looking at this from a long term, is if we, over a 6-month period, see that we attracted, let's say 100 new patients booked in a 6-month period, right? So that would give us that number of total patients, right? 100 patients, 6-month period. Then we can see, okay, of those 100 patients that booked, where did they come from, right? So let's just assume here for a second, 50 of those came from Google, right? And that's a combination of organic Google search and Google ads. Now let's say that we spent in that 6-month period $2,000 a month. So we spent $12,000 a month in Google Ads. So if we spent $12,000 a month in Google Ads, and over that time period, let's say 50 of those patients came from Google, but let's say 30 of those patients, we have the data to see it, 30 of those patients came from a Google ad specifically, well, then we know that, okay, we spent $12,000 in Google Ads. We divided that by the number of patients that we saw from the Google Ads, which was, in this example, 30. So it cost us $400 to acquire a new patient. So that's really helpful information to know, right? $400 to acquire a new patient on $12,000 ad spend over a 6-month period. So once you know that number, then you can start to look and see what's the average patient spend in the practice, right? So we have a lot of data that shows, on average, on the kind of conservative end, the average patient spends about $1,200 to $1,300 annually in a practice, general practice here. So if it took you $400 to get that new patient in the door, and these are quality patients, they're going to stay in the practice long-term because of the things we talked about previously, and we have the data to see that that patient's going to spend, on average, on the conservative side, $1,200 over a 12-month period, then that's 400 times 3 is 1,200. That's a 3-to-1 return. So that's where okay, when I give Google $1, I'm getting 3 back. That is how the smartest practice owners think of their marketing. It takes time to get there. Everything we've talked about is long-term. But once you have that data, you have those numbers, and assuming you're tracking it correctly, that's where you can really start to make game-changing decisions for the practice to grow. Because if you know that, and you have enough data that says $400 to acquire a new patient from Google, that doesn't mean it's going to stay $400 forever. You want to work on trying to lower that, and sometimes it may be higher on certain months of the year. But at least gives you an idea of where you say, okay, well, I know if we want to add 10 additional new patients per month from our Google Ads, then we can kind of reverse engineer this. So know what to track and look at that ROI and those hard numbers, and not just from a month-to-month basis, but a 6-month, 12-month basis. Those are going to give you long-term growth numbers. And then the final principle here when it comes to long-term growth in the practice and how short-term marketing is destroying your practice, and this is kind of the secret to marketing that many of us in this world we live in just aren't patient enough for. But the secret to great marketing and growth, let your marketing mature like a good investment. Whether it's your search presence on Google, whether it's your Google reviews, whether it's the paid ads you're running. You can't just launch an ad. Say, I ran an ad on Facebook for 30 days, 60 days. I spent $500. I didn't get any new patients. Facebook marketing doesn't work. That is, I see it all the time. I see people talking about this all the time. Or I tried Google Ads. I spent $600. It didn't work. Well, there's so many different factors there that lead to that. What keywords were you bidding on? Was your budget big enough with $600? Probably not. If you only ran it for like a month, that definitely wasn't long enough either. So look at your marketing as a great investment. If you were investing for your retirement or investing for something long-term, you're not going to expect to just throw a bunch of things in there and then get money back that next month. It just doesn't work that way. Sometimes it does, but that's not what you want to expect. But your marketing should start producing a really good return for you after you've stuck consistently with this 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. You should start seeing that return. And you have to measure it, right? That's what we've talked about here. But it takes time. Good marketing takes time, unless you want to throw the cheapest deals out, go high volume, call a bunch of leads, and get a very low percentage of those to book. So let your marketing mature like a good investment. If you do that, and these other topics that we talked about here in this video, in this podcast, you are going to be different right out the gates from most practice owners. And you have a distinct advantage when you think in these terms. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please reach out to us, crimsonmediagroup.com. If you have any questions about marketing your practice, or just want to chat with me and get a little bit of a marketing overview, I'm happy to do that as well. I love talking about these kind of things all day, every day, and watching successful practices grow. But thank you, everybody. Be sure, if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast, Dental Practice Launch Podcast. You can like our Crimson Media channel on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening. We'll be back in another week with episode 73 of the Dental Practice Launch Podcast. Thanks, everybody.